So the first week of 2023 has really flown by, but I don't think 2022 is a year that we're going to be forgetting about anytime soon. I thought it'd be interesting to make a video talking about all the kind of major or my main purchases over the previous year, and as a store owner give some more insight, and justification for why I made those purchases, some of the reasonings behind why I did it, and basically where those cards are at right now. So this video, of course, is going to focus on Pokemon, and it's also mainly going to focus on graded cards just because they're a little bit easier to kind of make this video for. So let's not waste any more time and let's get straight into it. I wanted to caveat this video by just saying that obviously I'm a store owner, so I do have a priority in ensuring that things are kind of running smoothly there. So unfortunately, you're not going to see me saying that I purchased the first edition base set Charizard for $300,000 and I've just been sat on it since. So nothing in that kind of upper echelon tier of trading card, but not to say the kind of cards I'm going to be talking about aren't cheap, because they are expensive. Just that if you're expecting me to say, oh, completely the entirety of base set first edition, I wasn't in the hobby, 2015, 16, 17, where it was just so much easier to complete those sets. I don't have an insane collection like a lot of people you probably hear about. I think this is probably a little bit more realistic. Again, some of the cards are still quite expensive, of course, but I think more kind of closer to the average person in the hobby relative to someone who's been in the hobby for 5, 6, 7 years and sat on an insane collection. So I just wanted to quickly mention that before we get started. The first card I'm going to talk about, and this is going to be in some kind of numerical order, so from kind of lowest to highest, of course, is the Shining Kabutops from Neo Destiny that I bought, and this was around about summer. I believe this was in June. So actually I won this card in a PWCC auction, and at the time I had absolutely no plans on keeping the card, so I just bought it as an immediate flip. Took a few months in the end to sell, but I bought it roughly, I believe, at $450, and then I sold it in the region of about 600. So not too bad of a flip, not insane of course, but a nice kind of easy, simple purchase straight up from PwC straight to me, and then find a great buyer who's happy to pick it up for a good price. That worked out for both of us. The next card is the Pretend Magikarp Pikachu promo. This card has a bit of a more interesting story relative to the card that just came before, the Shining Kabutops, in that I actually saw this card at a show. So I actually saw this card at Comic-Con last year, and I actually looked at it and was like, I was with a friend and I said, hey, that card's really cool, I really like it. I didn't actually own any of the Pretend Pikachu promos at the time, and I actually still don't, which is a bit of a clue as to where this card's gone. But I mentioned to the friend that, hey, this is a really interesting card, really cool card, and he was like, oh yeah, it's really cute, and we just discussed it, and then he was like, hey, why don't you buy it? And I was like, I don't know, I'm not, like, it's a really nice card, but not one thing I'm looking out for, wasn't part of my kind of collections at the time, kind of collection goals at the time. And as I mentioned earlier, I've kind of got to balance that with what I'm doing with the store and ensuring all that's kind of going on. So I was like, I don't really know. And he goes, dude, like, just ask at least, what do you think? So I was like, okay, cool. So I actually inquired with the store owner, and this was another store as well. So I can't recall exactly which store. It's probably better. It's probably better I don't actually say. So I actually inquired with them and said, hey, how much do you want for this card? And they turned around to me and said £500. So at the time, roughly $600 to $650. And I was like, okay, that's ridiculously cheap for what we have here. And at that moment, obviously, you're like, okay, cool. That's obviously brilliant price, and like my hands, it's kind of sad to say, but they were like starting to shake a little bit, and I was just trying to obviously keep composed. So I was just like, okay, sounds good. So I asked about that card, and I asked about another card which was an ultimate rare Elemental Hero Tempest, ultra rare in Japanese, so obviously a Yu-Gi-Oh card. But then I was just trying to keep it cool, and I know some people will say, oh well, you could have told them it was worth more, but it was, for me, it was a point where I was like, okay, having knowledge of the market and just knowing that the price, it was underpriced, and I confirmed the price with them, and they were like, yeah, that's fine, that's happy with that. So I actually ended up picking this card for, as I said, a little bit over $600. And then some months later, quite a few months later, I ended up selling it for around about 1100. I'm trying to convert everything into dollars just to make things a little bit easier, but I sold it for a little bit over $1,000, so I made a good $400 or $500 out of that, which was fantastic. I really thought about keeping it, and thinking now, I think one went on auction last week, and I think it fetched well over $1,500. I don't know the exact price, but I saw it as at $1,550, and of course it was kind of like, oof, painful. However, considering that I bought it at the price I did and I managed to sell it for what I did sell it, I thought, hey, you know what, can't complain. Shouldn't be too picky. So kind of that's the story on that one. So the third card I want to discuss, and as I said, it going in numerical order. So let's say this is like the third of the top 5 is the Raikou Gold Star from Unseen Forces. So this obviously one of the 3 gold stars from Unseen Forces, which has that kind of torrid history. I say torrid. Apparently, a lot of them were stolen from a factory in Europe. So if you haven't seen it already, if you don't know about it, there's like footage, and you should be able to find it on YouTube somewhere, of just binders and binders full of this card in like very mint condition. And it's for this reason that these 3 cards, the obviously Raikou, Entei, and the Suicune Gold Stars, aren't like higher in price basically, and they still command a decent price, of course, but they're not as high as many of the other Gold Stars, and they just don't have the same prestige. If you have those 3 Gold Stars, they're kind of like the worst Gold Stars you can have. Gold Stars are great, don't get me wrong, they are fantastic cards, but they're the kind of like little brother that you don't really want amongst the many amazing Gold Stars that we have. So I bought this Raikou Gold Star I actually offered someone on eBay, and I picked it up for around about $700, which at the time was okay. I thought they were a little bit underpriced, and it turns out quite quickly they went up in price, and I at the same time was thinking, hey, I think this is quite cheap, so I kind of just went for it, put in that bid, put in that offer, and the seller accepted. And I thought, hey, I managed to pick this up cheap, I might do the same thing with the Entei and the Suicune. And honestly though, before you knew it, those prices had kind of shot up, and next thing you knew, I think probably maybe 2 months later even, the card was going in auctions for like well over $900, so it was kind of reaching that $1,000 price point. And at that point I thought, hey, either have to go out and buy the Entei and the Suicune, or shall I just kind of get rid of it and see what I can get for it? And I was actually genuinely really torn, but then it was that kind of point that I've already mentioned, and that's the reason I did mention it, is that like the 3 dogs, the 3 beasts, are like the little brother of Gold Stars. They're not the ones that you want to go for. For me, if I was going to get a trio of Gold Stars, I mean, if anyone wants any Gold Star, you want the Rayquaza or the Charizard, right? But the trio I would go for are the Hoenn starters. Of course, I think that's kind of where it's at, but ridiculously expensive. So at that point, I was like, hey, maybe I'll just sell it. I can take the money and kind of take it forwards. But what I ended up doing actually was I ended up making a trade for it. So I traded this card with some cash on top for 2 ultimate rare Yu-Gi-Oh cards in PSA 10. So that is the first one being the Elemental Hero Thunder Giant, again ultimate rare PSA 10, and then a Destiny Hero Dogma ultimate rare PSA 10. If you didn't know, I'm a big Yu-Gi-Oh fan as well, so one reason why some of the cards here you might not think are as amazing as some other purchases potentially, or I didn't make more higher end purchases, was just because I've kind of been moving a little bit of my Pokemon inventory into Yu-Gi-Oh throughout the year, so I've picked up some cool Yu-Gi-Oh stuff, and those 2 were certainly part of it. So I believe I traded this with a value of around about $1,000, and then I paid, I think, maybe $300 on top for the Ultimate Rare Elemental Hero Thunder Giant and the Destiny Hero Dogma. So those 2 cards together basically worked out to be just over $1,000, and the Thunder Giant roughly goes in that price range itself, and the Dogma is probably maybe about $500 or $600. So I'm happy with that trade in the end. Picked up 2 cards that particularly the Thunder Giant, a big Elemental Hero Yu-Gi-Oh GX fan, so that was great. And the Dogma is just, it's one of the Destiny heroes I have in Ultimate Rare. I do have more Elemental heroes, so that makes more sense. So that's probably one I might end up getting rid of, but considering the price point I got it, I was kind of happy and have continued to keep those. So no longer have the Raikou, have those 2 Elemental heroes instead. But I still think kind of cool story in the end. The fourth card I want to talk about is the Lugia from Japanese Neo. So that's the first Neo set in Japanese, and it is the holo. It's obviously the same art as the Neo Genesis crazy Lugia that did crazy things in 2020, and obviously yes, the Japanese version. Story behind this, not as interesting as some of the other cards I've already discussed, but I basically bought this card from the Green Shiz on Instagram, YouTube, all socials. That's Josh. So shout out to Josh, the boss man. I bought this card off him, I believe towards the start of last year, and I paid $1,000 for it. And of the cards I've discussed, this is the one I still have, and it's still kind of going around that price. I don't think necessarily this was the most amazing purchase. So you've seen the three before, kind of worked out reasonably well. This one, if anything, it's probably lost a bit of value, and that's probably why I'm just at the moment I am actually trying to complete Neo Genesis in English in PSA 10 or 9, so I would really consider probably trading this for maybe some PSA 10s from Neo Genesis first edition. So, you know, if anyone wants to hit me up on Instagram, feel free to do that. But yeah, as I mentioned, I bought this card off the Green Shiz, who's a really great guy. You should definitely go check him out if you don't know him, which I imagine you probably do if you're watching this. And yeah, a great person to deal with, and received that card and was perfectly happy with that. The final card I want to discuss is the Shining Charizard from Neo Destiny. Unlimited, not first edition. I didn't spend $15,000 on this. I did in fact spend around $4,000 on this card. And another one of those where I held on to it, and I don't know, I got a really good offer for it, so I ended up just selling it. I got an offer closer to $5,000, a little bit over $5,000 at the time. And at that point I kind of just was like, okay, cool. I didn't really want to sell it immediately, but the offer I received, I thought, hey, maybe just consider it. And I considered it, thought about it, and was like, hey, do you know what, I'll take the money. And looking back again, one of those where it was probably a good idea. So the card's still roughly around about 4,000. I think the last sold was around about 4,300, 4,200. It's obviously up and down a little bit, but yeah, it kind of made out reasonably well there. Made probably a bit over $1,000, which nothing to certainly sniff at. I mean, that's more than the price I paid for the Lugia, of course, as well. So it was a good deal in the end. Was a bit kind of open to, we're certainly open to keeping the card, but it's something that, you know, if I wanted to kind of get back to picking up, as I said, I'm focusing on Neo Genesis, but Neo Destiny would certainly be one I'd want to look at afterwards. So that's the video then. Those are probably 5 of the biggest purchases, or at least Pokemon graded card purchases I made over the previous year. If you found the video interesting, please leave a like and subscribe. And if you're interested in watching anything similar, I'm happy to kind of discuss just some of my other thoughts and kind of experiences as a card store owner, and happy to kind of talk about similar stuff in future videos. So thank you for checking out the video, and I'll catch you in the next one.